There we go. Okay. And thanks to those of you who are joining us live online. It's so helpful to have those of you online, and we'll have some discussion tonight. And then actually got a couple scenarios tonight. So definitely probably half an hour, maybe 40 minutes in. We have some scenarios that I'm going to go through with you guys. So get ready to be active participants. You will at that point need to either speak up or type for me. And I'm going to start it off tonight just quickly and just ask that you type is probably easiest where you are right now and your sport. I know some of you guys, but it's nice to share with everyone. So we have Amanda on Churro weightlifting. Welcome, Amanda. And so that everyone knows who I am, so I'm Natasha Johnson. I'm the coaching lead with the Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic. I'm going to be leading you guys through tonight's webinar on safe sport. And we're going through a mix of information that's been recently shared with our PSOs here in the province, as well as a lot of information that's being put together nationally. And then I sit on a committee here in Nova Scotia putting together the direction for safe sport moving forward as part of the sort of changing the game work that's going on within our province. So I'll share where we are with that as well. So Darren, we have basketball, softball, awesome. Giselle is typing. And then I know I can see John and Lola are both online as well. And they are with cycling. Okay, I'm going to mute your mic. Okay, perfect. So that's fine. And so, yeah, and we have swimming in Labrador City. Awesome. Okay, so we've got 4 in Nova Scotia, 1 in Labrador. Awesome. Some of tonight's information will be Nova Scotia specific. Most of it is not. I am going to quickly touch, though, on the direction that we're going in this province, which it looks like will be similar across all the other provinces. I just don't have the information from the other Atlantic provinces to date. Okay, great. So thanks you guys again for joining us tonight, and we'll get rolling through this. As you have questions tonight, please either unmute your mic and just speak up to those who have it access to it, or you can type a question at any time. I can see the chat box the whole time. So we'll get rolling. And if I'm going too fast or too slow, let me know as well. Some of it, I've seen this information for so long, I might go a little too fast. So please speak up if this is brand new to you and you've never seen it, so we can slow down. So what we're going to go through tonight are the 10 international safe sport principles and give you guys a little information on what those are. And sorry, actually, even before number 1, I'm going to go through a lot of the background information on what is safe sport, where we are, why we're talking about it tonight, and what has brought us to this evening. What is the responsible coaching movement, Nova Scotia's implementation plan, how you can implement safe sport principles regardless of where you are or what level you coach, or what your involvement is within your sport, how it will affect your coaching, again, regardless of sort of what level you're at or where you are, it will affect potentially what you're doing. Moving forward, things to do and things that will be done, and then we'll open it up to some questions. So a little bit of the background information on why we're offering tonight and where some of this information has come is initially within Nova Scotia. This has come up because of a mandate from a spring sport forum that we did. So we had a lot of people come together in sport and we discussed priority areas, and having safe sport, which is sport free of harassment and abuse, was a big part of what we heard from the community that they wanted to ensure was there. So out of that, I mentioned changing the field of play a few minutes ago. So out of that came a sport transformation prototype group, which is what that little prototype group is what I sit on, which is a group of people from all different organizations talking about, what is safe sport and how can we move things forward here. And then, I'm not going to go through the introduction, sorry. And then at the same time, has any of you heard from the federal sport minister's mandate that came out? Like, did any of you either see it in the news? Did you get it passed along from your NSO or PSO? Just type in the box. I'm interested to know how far that mandate announcement made it. No? Okay, perfect, Darren. Thanks. PSO. Okay, good, Amanda. Yeah, I thought I'd heard it get to some PSO level. No? Okay, great. So this was the mandate that came out from Kirsty Duncan, the Minister of Science and Minister of Sport and Persons with a Disability in Canada. If you were involved directly with an NSO, this highly affected you. This mandate came out directly from her. And then all the multi-sport organizations would have received it as well. And now we're passing on the message, to our PSOs, to the clubs, and to our coaches to understand again where the swell of urgency is coming for safe sport across Canada. So this was a couple months ago now that Kirsty released this statement that harassment of any kind is completely unacceptable, and the safety and security of athletes, coaches, and officials is always our top priority. We must all play a role in protecting our young people and our athletes, to speak up when we see something that doesn't seem quite right, and really listen to our athletes. And most importantly, to act when the situation demands it, to ensure our athletes always have the support they need from us. And I'm sure most of you had heard about what was going on down in Michigan State University in the United States. So again, this sort of came after that, which is when you first saw this hitting the news very heavily over the last bunch of months. So that's what that statement was. This statement also had implications within our NSOs. So at this time that Kirsty made this announcement, the NSOs were basically told within their funding agreements that something had to be done over the next couple of years in order to continue to receive Sport Canada funding. This is why it is high up the priority list. So I just want to very quickly from you guys ask, and either use your mic or you can type in. So a little background on why we're here is the Canadian Sports Centre has 2 members on the prototype group trying to pass along the information and help make sport safer in Nova Scotia and across Atlantic Canada, and to also why we're involved is to be able to pass on the information to groups and persons like yourself, so our coaches and those involved in sort of the leadership aspect of sport. And we understand as well that if we're going to get high performance athletes eventually in any sport, we need the environment to be great, and we want the athletes to have fun and stay involved. So my question to each of you is, what drove you here tonight? So why are you here tonight? Why is this interesting for you? Are you, whatever it may be, a head coach of your club and you're interested in implementing some new things within the club, or is it something that you've heard from your PSO or NSO? Like, just sort of what drew you to tonight's webinar and this information? So John, extra info, perfect. That's great. And so for those online that don't know, so John is more or less the one competitive cycling coach in Nova Scotia, so he would definitely be what would be considered the head coach. Lola made commitment at last NSO Congress to fully implement by next year. Perfect. Okay, good. So you've got sort of some deadlines on implementation coming down the line that we can help you work on. Darren, coach developer, fantastic. So you're seeing lots of coaches, and you're a great person to continue passing on this message. That's excellent. Giselle, desire to keep my team safe while in sport. Yep, awesome. That's great. And then Amanda, interested in how it affects PSOs. Think the initiative is important. Okay, fantastic. Good. As we go through tonight then, if you guys have any specific sort of implementation questions or how it may fit into your role or what you're trying to do, so either within your team or as a coach developer, how you're going to pass this message on, speak up and ask so we can really get into specifics for you guys. So this was a neat kind of timeline that I put together on in recent history. Now this is very recent history, where we are to date in Atlantic Canada and when we started hearing about the responsible coaching movement and the safe sport movement. So also, just while I speak, I'd love you guys to type in who before this webinar had heard of responsible coaching movement. So the reason I say this is recent history is because the first time Sport Canada and the government of Canada started talking about harassment and abuse in sport was actually back in the 80s. So this is by no means new. NSOs had to implement harassment policies back in the 80s. Things got very quiet for a long time, and then it's just really resurfaced in the last couple of years here, in the last 5 years or so. So 2013, 2014, you may have started hearing about the responsible coaching movement. It's when the CAC began researching safe sport practices within our NSOs and started talking to coaches. So 14, again, 2014, 2015, it was born, and the education started to sport organizations across Canada. So at that time, I was lucky to be working for Canada Snowboard, and we were, one of the NSOs that got to kind of hear about it from the start, and it sparked our interest in how do we ensure that our coaches are safe and our athletes are safe. In June of 2017, so just last year, the Sports Centre and NSOs heard from Child Protection Services Canada, and it was a really strong training on what was happening within sport, the reporting that they were getting from parents and athletes and other coaches. And really at that time, there was we need action in sport and we need to do something. In the fall, we added Safe Sport to a national PSO assessment tool. So this is a tool that eventually will be used for assessing where PSO is nationwide. So that was added as a new aspect to what's looked at within a PSO. And then in the spring here in Nova Scotia, this prototype was born. And in the summer, the CSCA adopted a safe sport policy within our Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic. So that's the recent history of where we are on things. And so, John, thank you. So you'd heard about the responsible coaching movement. Am I assuming that anyone else had you heard about it? We're going to get into what it is anyway, but yes. Okay, good, Amanda. Great. Okay. So a little bit, again, like on the urgency side of things, so we had the minister's mandate come out, and then we did an assessment of our PSOs within Nova Scotia, and I'm quite sure that this would be echoed in New Brunswick, PEI, and Newfoundland from what we've looked at and across the country. And the safe sport question in our PSO assessment was the lowest score of all questions. So only one sport at that time had signed the responsible coaching movement and had implemented fully all of the policies required for it. So others had signed it and sort of made the pledge but not moved forward with implementation. The majority of our sports, so about 63% of our sports, were doing little to nothing in this space and hadn't started thinking about it yet. So again, this is why we want to support you guys as coaches, your clubs, and the PSOs to get somewhere on this, but it's also to highlight to you on the line, if you're thinking, oh, we haven't done anything in this space, this assessment was just done in the winter and spring. So it is new for most of our organizations, and it's an area that we can all be stronger in and get better in. Okay. So getting into what I promised I would is these Safe Sport International principles. Has anyone on the line heard of the Safe Sport International group or the U.S. Center for Safe Sport? And if you guys type away if you have. Little background on each. So Safe Sport International is an international group that we have partners, CCES, so the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport is part of them, or is a partner of them, sorry. And they're doing some really great international work in this space. And then what's been really neat to see is that some of the national groups like the United States have gone forward and created their own independent safe sport organizations. So a great example is the U.S. Center for Safe Sport. I encourage any of you to go on their website. I actually had a coach come in the office today and tell me about their training, like this group does their own independent training for coaches, and he said it's absolutely phenomenal. So you're going to start to see, I'm sure, over the next months and years, these nationally driven safe sport organizations come up. The reason we're talking about it today, Canada doesn't have one of those, so Safe Sport within Canada currently does not live within any single organization. So what we've decided to do here in Nova Scotia, and we hope this will move across Atlantic Canada and across Canada is the ideal, is to adopt the Safe Sport International principles, so that we are going with internationally accepted principles and having consistency in what we're trying to do. So the premise of these principles is basically that if an organization adopts these 10 principles, that it will allow that group to be creating a safe sport environment and creating a place that's safe for the athletes, coaches, officials, administrators, the entire picture. And the reason we wanted to look at something like these principles instead of just singular training or something like the responsible coaching movement, which is integrated into this, and I'll get into that, but was to really find a way to have the most holistic view of what safe sport was, and also to try and reduce some of the confusion. So right now, and you guys probably know this as coaches, is you're hearing all these different terms, you're hearing responsible coaching movement, you're hearing all these different trainings available, and we wanted to try and find a way to have that all fit into something. And the way we found that to fit is through the adoption of these international principles. So you're all going to get a copy of this slideshow after tonight, so I'm not going to go through these in any fine detail. What I will do is I'm just going to go through them quickly and then ask that you guys, in your own time, take a look at them, especially if you're within a club and you're ready to move forward with implementation, or you're within a PSO like Lola and John. We have a chart to help those groups implement these principles. But for now, this is really just the higher level information. So as coaches, what we ask is just that initially you take a look at these and its information, and then eventually, as organizations are adopting this, that the coaches are aware and know these principles. So simply and quickly, the first one's that the welfare, safety, and rights of all athletes is considered in the administration and delivery of sport. That all sport organizations work together with appropriate partners to prevent and respond to violence against athletes. That sport organizations establish and disseminate relevant code of ethics and conducts that'll help prevent breaches of safe sport. So these are all things, that we're hearing lots about. That all members of the athlete's entourage, including officials, support staff, coaches, leaders, and instructors, undergo appropriate education and training as a condition of their qualification to be coaching, and we'll get into for you guys what that could look like for you as a coach. Again, that all members of that entourage undergo appropriate background or criminal record check and provide evidence of these. And actually on that number 5, just before we get into implementation, how many of the 5 of you were asked to provide a criminal record check or background check to your either club or PSO? Interested to see that. And while you guys are typing that, so John, yes, okay, great. Number 6, that athletes be educated and informed about their rights to be safeguarded and how to report concerns. And this number 6 is the one that's interesting across Canada, is that we're finding that athletes aren't educated and aren't aware of what is considered okay, safe, appropriate, age appropriate. And currently there's little to no formalized training in that area. The good news is that there is training coming out that we can all use for cross multi-sport for all of our athletes in that area. And I'm just reading your guys' comments. So cycling, yes, yes, yes. Awesome. Okay, great. Amanda, that's okay. You guys are moving in a good direction. Darren, it's required within the NSO. Yeah, great. Okay, good. So, and what's interesting is if I'd asked that 5 years ago, the responses would probably be more varied. So that's really great to see that aspect. Okay. Numbers 7 to 10 on the Safe Sport in International principles are really about the reporting. So ensuring that there's proper reporting and complaints protocols in place, and that there's basically someone for those to go to, that they're investigated in a timely manner, and that there's a proper process in place, and the reporting takes place. And if you take a quick look through 7 to 10 and you refer it back to what you've heard about in the news, these are the areas where a lot of the organizations that are currently having some issues with some things coming up with coaches or others in their organization, policies weren't in place, and when there was a complaint, it wasn't always clear on who that would go to or what the process was. So this is an area for all of us to really be aware on. And for coaches, like, let's all ask ourselves now, do we know if there was an incident, if we saw an incident today, do we know who to report it to and what that process looks like? And unfortunately for a lot of us, including myself, with my coaching hat on until recently, I would have had no idea who that should go to and what that process would look like. And that's because in some organizations that's not in place right now. So this is the work that has to happen. Okay, so I'll go through this fairly quickly again because you guys will have this recording, you'll have this slideshow, and you've pretty much all heard of the responsible coaching movement. So as a little quick refresher, what it was a multi-phase system, or what it is, sorry, it still is this, is a multi-phase system-wide movement by the CAC and the CCES that has and had affected all sport organizations and coaches. Its goal is to make sport safer for children and the vulnerable sector. And for here in Nova Scotia, when we're really talking vulnerable, that's those under the age of 18, so the age of majority. And this little statement is interesting, that although advances in athlete protection in the past 20 years have decreased instances of athlete maltreatment in amateur sport, athlete abuse, harassment by coaches, and risk to athletes have continued to occur. And most recently, those are what you hear hitting the news. So again, it had been quiet for a long time in the news, but unfortunately that's coming out, and a lot of it is just that they had not been reported over the last 20 years, that these cases were still happening. So the RCM did take a lot of research. I think they researched for over a year, and will really address the role coaches play with issues relating to the health and safety of athletes, both on and off the field of play. And it has 3 areas of focus. And what we're going to go through right now are the 3 areas of the responsible coaching movement, and then we're going to chat through what implementation could look like for each of those areas. So the rule of 2 is the one that I get the largest number of questions on. So the actual statement from the CAC is that there will always be 2 screened and NCCP trained or certified coaches with an athlete, especially a minor athlete, when in a potentially vulnerable situation. Ideally, one of those coaches must also be the same gender as the athlete. In a circumstance where a second screened and NCCP trained or certified coach is not available, a screened parent, volunteer, or adult can be recruited. And this rule is in place to protect those minor athletes in vulnerable situations by ensuring that more than one adult is present. So a vulnerable situation could include closed-door meetings, travel, and training environments. So again, I'll go through these, and then don't worry, we will talk through these because that's the important aspect of tonight. So the second aspect of the responsible coaching movement is background screening, of which a CRC, or a criminal record check, is one aspect. The background screening process uses a number of different tools to ensure that coaches meet the necessary security requirements to coach athletes. And I'm really encouraged, like I said tonight, that all of your organizations require that aspect. So when we say comprehensive screening requirements or security requirements, what does that mean? I'm going to give you guys a great checklist tonight that you can use within your PSO, your club. You can use it for yourself. But some of these things include ensuring that there's comprehensive job postings, criminal record checks are done, interviews are done, and reference checks are done. And interviews are an interesting one because it's a very important aspect of screening, and it's one that common times we skip out on coaches. So especially with large sports and you're recruiting volunteers, there's organizations that decide to not do interviews, and it's a very important part of the background screening process. So ensuring that all of our clubs, all of our PSOs are having all of these steps in place. And then lastly, respect and ethics training. And just for fun, I'll ask you guys just to type those that are online. Who has done respect in sport or respect in the workplace as part of their role in sport? And so the respect and ethics training portion of the responsible coaching movement leaves it a little open, but there's multiple trainings available. The most well-known are, of course, the Making Ethical Decisions module, which is an NCSP module, and respect in sport. Those are sort of the standard ones done. Okay, done. Yes, awesome. Okay, great to see some of you guys have done it. It's really well done. I've done ethical decisions. Yeah, great. Okay. Okay. So what I've got on the screen now, don't panic. This is information again that I'm going to that you'll be provided to deep dive further into it. But this is when I was talking about implementation plans. This is what the draft of what it could look like in Nova Scotia and the area that we're moving in. So the plan is to initially work with the PSOs and then to move down to assisting the CSOs and clubs, CSOs and coaches. But I wanted to show this to you as a group of coaches so that you can look at the far right column. So what this example is the 10 Safe Sport International Principles in the left in the green, and then what the PSO would do to implement that. And then the far right is the important column for you is what the coach does to implement those policies. So these are the ones we're going to quickly go through tonight because, again, it doesn't matter currently where your organization is, what it's implemented or not implemented. These are the things that you as a coach can work towards implementing yourself or encourage that your club or your PSO begins to implement. And Amanda, don't worry, we'll get into that. I'll share where you can access Respect in Sport shortly. So the first principle, that the welfare, safety, and rights of athletes is essential consideration. So that can be done by the coach by operating under those responsible coaching movement principles. So ensuring that you have proper screening, the respect and ethics training, and implementing the rule of two. Working with partners to prevent violence. So the coaches can be educated about safe sport. And so in here as well, you're going to see Safe Sport Office. That's referring to what we're planning to do within Nova Scotia and implementing a Safe Sport Office. That does not currently exist. So this is what we would like to do. And then as well within the other provinces, it may look slightly differently. So Safe Sport could be an aspect of the government, could live within your provincial sporting body. There's going to be some work that has to happen within each of the provinces to see where this lives. But basically, as that happens, us as coaches need to be educated about what safe sport is, what responsible coaching movement is, and then what our provincial body is doing for reporting procedures. And then also passing that on to the athletes, parents, and other coaches. That's the really important thing. So for Code of Ethics and Conduct, hopefully you guys are operating in an organization that has a code of conduct that your athletes sign, or maybe yourself as a coach have created one and get them to sign. There's always the CAC code of conduct that all of our coaches can sign and should be signing across Canada because it's standard. And then having all the athletes sign your CSO, PSO code of ethics or conduct and sticking with that as well. So, and then this one's interesting. Number 4 is we had touched on earlier going through these is about the appropriate training for coaches and ensuring that that's done. And so our recommendation here within the Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic and then also within our province is that what appropriate coach training looks like in this area would be the Commit to Kids course, and I'll get into a little bit more in a minute on what that is if you guys have not heard about it. Making ethical decisions, which I'm sure you've all done, and respect in sport, which we briefly touched on. So the understanding, and this is becoming more of an understanding nationwide as well with some consistency, is that coaches, having done those 3 trainings, have a good picture of the different aspects of safe sport. So what harassment and abuse looks like, how to report it. Commit to Kids is sexual abuse specific, so what that looks like and how to report that, what's a legal issue versus not, and what to do in those cases. And then the last 3 that I'll go through here, the 5, 6, 7. So ensuring that you've done appropriate background training. So the coach implementing would be that everyone within the club, every coach, completes a CRC, and those working with athletes under 18 would do the vulnerable sector check, and this would be redone every 3 years. So again, it's something that, you don't do your CRC once and it stays on file for 20 years. It should be redone every 3 years, because as soon as the CRC is done, you don't get updates on if there's a criminal conviction in between. So doing it every 3 years just to recheck. The athlete education is the one I was saying is coming soon. So Respect Group, which is a group that does respect in sport training, is doing an athlete-specific training right now that we'll all be able to share with our athletes as soon as it's released. I can't remember. I apologize. We just had someone here from Respect Group doing some training for us, and I can't recall when he said it would come out, but I believe it's early 2019. And at that time, we'll have an appropriate education to pass on to our athletes. And then the reporting, which again covered sort of 7, 8, 9, 10, is knowing how to report our cases to our PSOs. So what I'll ask after this webinar is that if you're the PSO, reflect upon what do we do when a coach reports an incident. And then if you're a coach within an organization, asking your organization at this time, what is the protocol? Who do I speak to? And what happens at that time? And there are some great examples out there. So if any of you are going, oh my goodness, we don't have anything, I don't know what to do, I don't know what that would look like, there are some great examples out there. So you can speak to myself initially, and I can refer you on after that for those that need some more help. Are there any questions? I'll just go back for a sec. Are there any questions just on simply what the responsible coaching movement is, the 10 principles at this time? And then I'm going to get into Amanda's question on where you access things. And then we'll get into how to implement this further. No? Okay. And again, type questions as you have them. So again, I'm not going to go through this in detail because I'm giving you this afterwards, this slideshow. But here are different trainings available in the safe sport space, and I'm going to specifically refer to some of the ones I've mentioned. So the responsible coaching movement, there's a ton of great information online for coaches to share with parents, for clubs to try and to work on implementing the responsible coaching movement, for PSOs. There's just lots of great stuff online, and that's all available at coach.ca. The Respect Group. So Amanda, this answers your question, is this link, the second link down. And what we did with this little chart that we put together was explain, who the group is. So Respect in Sport by the Respect Group, the different trainings available, who we would see doing that training, like who it's appropriate for. So coaches and instructors, sports science staff, sort of everyone. We required everyone in our workplace here at the Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic to do respect in the workplace, for example. But coaches would do respect in sport. There's also respect in sport for parents, which is a fantastic training for parents to take. It's one that hockey has implemented nationwide with great success rates over a long period of time. And all of that is at that link there. Commit to Kids is the one that I've mentioned that's sexual abuse specific, and that's recommended to all coaches. It is a longer online training, so Respect is online. Commit to Kids is online. Commit to Kids does take a little longer to go through. It's very heavy information, but it's very eye-opening and a really well done training. So that link is there as well. And a lot of our NSOs and PSOs are committing to this training as a group block. So I would encourage you to speak to your either PSO, CSO, NSO before doing these trainings and see if they're moving in that direction, so that there might be an access code or whatnot that you can get to access these. Excuse me. And then there's some extra information on here, like Safe Places is a neat initiative that Saskatchewan has done with kind of recreation facilities. On this next page, there's the Making Ethical Decisions, which is on coach.ca. Making Headway in Sport, if you haven't heard of, is concussion training. There's High Five training. And then there's Club Excellence, which is a program that recognizes clubs and associations towards capacity building. So all of these things, there's a lot out there that are great things, offering programs and services and trainings to coaches and PSOs and organizations. And what we wanted to do is just put them all down in one place so that you as coaches can refer to them, know where things live, and know what they are. But really our recommendation for coaches is doing the Making Ethical Decisions training, Commit to Kids, and Respect in Sport. And I'll share with you as well, I don't recommend you do that all at once. This is the the longer term. Break these up, but yeah. So we're going to dive into the real interesting part here, and I want definitely you guys to ask questions as we go along. Have any of you, your organization or whatever you're part of, implemented the rule of two as to date? Yes, great. So again, for those of you who are kind of just hearing this again for the first time tonight, so that rule of two is those 2 screen coaches or 2 adults, whatever it is. As a guide, yes. Okay, awesome. So for those that are working towards implementing it, here's some examples of how it could be implemented, especially how it could be started in an implementation process. So we all need to understand as well that, especially as coaches within a program, is that we can't necessarily implement everything that we're talking about tonight within one season or 1 year. It's a lot. So how can we phase some of these aspects in is kind of what we're talking about within the implementation. So an example, all provincial teams sanctioned training camps and competitions with minors would require 2 adults, chaperones, one of whom must be the same gender as the athlete. So that's sort of the exact CAC statement put into application. Well, that's that first example. Another example, which is maybe more relevant to those of you who are in smaller sports or sports that are in a gym environment, and this could be also used within sports that are smaller sports that operate outside, is ensuring that there's open gym doors and ensuring there's always more than 2 athletes with 1 adult or multiple chaperones. Again, knowing the ideal is 2 screened coaches or a screened coach and a screened chaperone, but there are scenarios where you're not going to have that. Available, or things also happen. So again, as some of us have said online, as a guide, if you can't have your 2 coaches or 2 chaperones or coach and chaperone, the other alternative, especially when starting implementation, would be to ensure that there's always at least 2 athletes with that 1 adult, so that you're never in a scenario where it's a 1 adult to 1 minor situation. One of the number 1 questions that I get right now with groups trying to implement this is team travel. And so the recommendation, there's lots of different ways this can be done. One example is to ensure that the rule of 2, so if you're a single coach and you're traveling with a small team and you're wondering how can I implement rule of 2 on the road, is pairing up with another team on travel with small groups and especially sharing the accommodation so that you have 2 screened adults together with the group of children within the accommodation scenario. And this is working well within some of our Atlantic Canadian teams. So I've heard some really great best practices of, Team PEI or Team Newfoundland and Team Nova Scotia pairing up for travel so that you stay at the same hotel, or you get a bed, an Airbnb together. And that way you get your 2 coaches without an individual club or PSO having to send 2 adults to that event. So those are some quick examples. I'm going to go through this part fairly quickly because I do want to get into my scenarios, but these are some further steps when implementing that can help you put this rule of 2 into place. So, great exercise with your athletes. Identify situations that make them feel vulnerable and discuss ways to deal with them. And again, this one's such a great exercise because it can be done in every sport, and every sport is going to look different in this aspect. When identifying your coaching team, considering the demographics of your athletes and ensuring appropriate composition of staff. So again, this is male, female, and otherwise. What do the athletes look like? And let's ensure that we have representation within the coaches. Allow training environments to be open and observable by parents and the public. So if some of us are in things like cycling, for example, we were discussing today, and you're in the middle of the woods, maybe the parents aren't around, but ensuring that the training environment is observable to the public or passerbys. My background is coaching snowboarding, so always ensuring that my training is observable by the general public on the hill is meeting the requirement of rule of 2. And that, again, same thing on the next point. And then avoiding private or one-on-one situations unless it's an emergency. So always leaving an office door open, having a conversation that's visible. So also things like private athlete meetings, maybe moving them to a coffee shop, or at the minimum ensuring that the door is open and that you are observable wherever you are. As a coach, really important at this point too, to identify situations during your own practice or competition environment that could put you or your athletes in a vulnerable situation, and then think about, okay, this is how it's always been done, or this is how I'm doing it now, but with this lens in mind, how could I rethink that and potentially change the environment to meet the requirement of rule of 2 and open and observable. Encouraging parents to support their children's involvement is just very helpful in this. And then also this note on travel is that if you cannot have the 2 adult to multiple athlete scenario, then that comment on ensuring that when you arrive at the destination and during the event that you're finding they say a buddy coach, but what I've seen most is a coach from another province, or even another club partnered up to be kind of your partner coach at the event. So that's rule of 2. The second aspect here on the background screening. So implementing the background screening is in theory a little simpler because you can go through a checklist. So ensuring that all coach job advertisements have screening as a condition of the employment. And then what I'll share with you guys is this great checklist. Has anyone seen this checklist on the CSC website? It's available to all, and it'll be sent out in this, but it's on the coach.ca website. And it's the Responsible Coaching Movement Background Screening Matrix. And I'll have you take a deeper look at it when you're ready. But the blue is basically low-risk positions. So this is within your club, non-volunteer parents or occasional volunteers, and what screening is recommended for those people. And then level 2, so you've got this orange. So some of you may fall in this orange area. This would be like volunteer head coaches within a club, assistant coaches, directors. So if you're on the board of directors within a PSO, CSO, whatever it is, this is what's recommended for that group. And then you go to the next level, the high risk, which is any of our paid head coaches, travel team coaches, and team managers traveling with teams, and what the CAC recommends for screening for those people. So I like this checklist because you can go through it regardless of your situation or sport and kind of have a nice guide of what should I be doing as screening. Any questions on that? Very helpful tool. And the last one before we get into some scenarios is the respect and ethics training. So this is just simply one recommendation or scenario for how you could move forward on implementing that aspect. But the recommendation would be that maybe year one, you could have your coaches complete and yourself complete the NCCP, Making Ethical Decisions online evaluation, which many of them have already done, and then do the Respect and Sport online training in year one, and then year two, implement the Commit to Kids training. And the reason I broke the recommendation up into those two aspects is that that ends up being about equal time spent doing the training. So in total, if you were to sit down and do all of this, it would be 6 or 7 hours required. So can you break that up into, about 3 hours required over 2 years, which is more digestible for coaches? And fully understanding that, yes, this means, more training for coaches, more time spent doing this. So we want to be cognizant of that. And then the real valuable conversation can happen after these trainings are done. And the recommendation would be to have guided discussions after these trainings with a group of coaches within your CSO or within your PSO, and talk about what are some potential policy or behavioral changes required within the club or PSO having done these trainings. And these trainings really, we did them within our sports center, and they really bring up some great reflection pieces on, oh, this is happening a little bit here. What can we do about it? How can we change things? So that's the recommendation on that. Okay, so I hope you guys are ready to either type or unmute your mics and speak up. We're going to go through 3 quick scenarios to really dive into what this could look like in your sport, and what do we do. So I want you guys talking on these, and we're near the end, so hopefully your energy is okay. I know it's late. So in this scenario, number 1, in this picture, this is 2 athletes with 1 coach on a chairlift. So my question to you is, which rule would apply here? Got Amanda typing first. Rule of 2. Awesome, you nailed it. So in this scenario, is this okay? Why or why not? You guys can all type your answer at first. Or sorry, at once I meant. So awesome. So we have open to public and yes, public. Awesome. So you guys nailed that first one. That's great. So yes, in this case, this is the rule of 2 is applying in this case. And although it's 1 athlete with 1 coach with 2 athletes, yes, it's okay. For 1, you have the 2 athletes paired up with the 1 coach, and then second to that, it's open to the public. So you're on a chairlift where you can see, where the public can see you. So yeah, great, you guys nailed it. And the funny thing is, I did initially, when we were first working on implementation of RCM, we got so many questions and coaches thinking that this was not appropriate. So good job for you guys. Yes, this does meet those requirements. So scenario number 2, again, is one that is a common one that I get. So in this scenario, a volunteer coach tells you that they're a teacher and they've done their background check already. Do they require further screening? And what would that include? What do you guys think? So the teacher said they've already done it. Do they require screening for your situation? And what would that include? So Lola says that yes, they would require further screening, and that would include the criminal record check in vulnerable sector. Lola, yes, especially after the recent news. So funny thing, I did not put this scenario in. This is an old scenario that I had made up, so that is funny. Yeah, it's even more relevant now. If you guys have missed, there's been some recent news within the school system in Nova Scotia. But yes, you are right, Lola. So yes, so it doesn't matter if they've submitted their CRC to another organization. They must submit it to you. So you have to, as an organization and the ones hiring the coach or volunteer coach, like when we say hiring, a volunteer and a paid person, you're still hiring them for a role. So that organization that's doing it needs to have a copy of that check. So it can either be shared through something like BackCheck, or you have a physical copy, which is at least viewed by someone, recorded that it's been viewed, and then it could be destroyed, but it has to be viewed by someone within that organization. And then the further screening that that person should be going through includes that criminal record check, which was mentioned, potentially the vulnerable sector if they're working with children, as well as the interview and the reference check. Because again, even though they may have done this in their other job, or maybe they're a firefighter or a policeman or any of those things, you still need to duplicate it for the sport scenario. My last scenario that I have for you guys tonight is another rule of 2-1. So in what scenario can you ever be in an athlete's hotel room or have an athlete in your hotel room? And this one is so common for all of our sports that travel. So what do you guys think? Let's have some discussion around this one. So can you go into your athlete's hotel room? What does it look like? Can you have your athlete over in your hotel room? You guys can all jump in with your opinion. Don't worry. This is for conversation and discussion, so we can fully understand this. So Lola says more than one coach, specifically of the same gender. Yep. So that's one great guide for this, is that ensuring that if you're going to be entering an athlete's room, especially, that you're doing so with 2 adults, 2 coaches, and one of the same gender. Yeah, that's always the ideal as well. And then really same thing if the athletes are coming into your room, protecting yourself by ensuring that someone else, another adult, is in that room with you. What else could be done, or what else could that scenario look like? Type away, you guys. I know it's getting late. You might be getting tired. So I know in some, so door open. Yes, thank you, Lola. That was one I was looking for. Amanda got it as well. Leave the door open. Maybe it's a team meeting. Okay, perfect. Those are the last 2 I was hoping to hit off. So yeah, we can leave the hotel door room open. And I know the hotel rooms dislike it, but propping it open so that it's wide open. And you may have to explain to the hotel that, during this time it has to be propped open. And then team meetings are great because you have multiple athletes in the room at a time. So you guys nailed it. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so the last couple slides. So I just wanted to share with you guys, if you're looking for groups that are doing kind of moving things forward within this space, and you're looking for some best practices, or hey, what could this look like within a sport if it's not a sport that you're involved in? So Gazelle was involved in swimming, which is awesome. So swimming is one of our best practices at an NSO and within Nova Scotia as well. But their NSO, which is what this snapshot is from, have hired a safe sport officer at the national level. They've got a great section on their website that they're just launching now on safe sport and what that looks like within swimming. So there's some really cool things that are coming out of swimming as best practices within this space. So I encourage you to turn to that organization nationally if you're looking for some best practices. The second one, this is a snapshot of Gymnastics Nova Scotia's website, but Gymnastics Canada has done very similar things to swimming. They're moving very quickly in this space. Unfortunately for them, it is because there's been a lot of news lately in this area, but they're doing some really great work in this space. So I also encourage you to turn to go to the Gymnastics Canada website and talk to your local contact if you have one within gymnastics, and keep updated on what they're doing, because they're also moving very quickly and efficiently in improving things in the safe sports space. So I'm just going to fly through, how is this going to affect your coaching? And I'm sure as you've been listening, there's lots of different ways that it will affect it. But what can the coaches do? So you can do everything that's implemented in that, or that is in that implementation chart, but the coaches play the vital role in ensuring the athletes are safe. Like, you are the connection between everything. You're the glue. And there's been more education recently on having parents ask the coach, what are you doing to ensure that my athlete's safe? So what you as a coach can turn around and ensure that you're doing is asking your organizations if they've taken the RCM pledge. So has your PSO, has your CSO? Does your organization have key policies to help support you as the coach, including travel policies, code of conducts? And then I would also add like discipline and reporting policies, and ensuring that they're current and enforced, ensuring that all coaches and volunteers are appropriately screened. So, did you have to go through appropriate screening? And then all of your assistant coaches or those that you work with. And then doing the trainings we talked about. So the Commit to Kids, Respect in Sport, and Making Ethical Decisions training. And then in the practical sense, so how are you going to see this over the next couple of years affect your coaching? So one of the first things that you're going to see is hiring new coaches or staff. So there may be new policies or procedures for screening. You as a coach may be asked to go through more steps of the screening. And it's our understanding, and I think it was Darren, you said you were a coach developer. So ensuring that our coaches moving forward understand that, yes, it may take longer to get hired. And yes, I'm asked to do more things, but this is in place to protect our coaches and our CSOs and our PSOs and our athletes and the whole sport world. Because of that, it may require additional time to hire. And clubs and organizations may require additional staff capacity to meet the rule of two. We have to understand that this is likely to add cost, especially to team travel, but it may add costs even to programming to ensure that we have two coaches in place. In some sports, this is starting to have some insurance implications. So some insurers are basically saying that we're not going to insure the organization or the coach unless they've done or they have a safe sport policy and they're implementing it. So, double check with your sport as well as if there's been any insurance changes. And I think as we see that change, it'll happen quickly. And then moving forward, you may be mandated from either your province, your NSO, or your PSO. And if any of you have come from out west, Saskatchewan and Manitoba both mandate, it's legislated under law that all coaches take respect in sport training. So, that was done a few years ago. You didn't see it happen nationwide, but I think we're in the space now where that may be happening across every province in Canada. So, prepare yourself. Thank you for joining tonight. You're getting ahead of the curve on information, but that this may be coming down the pipeline. And I just noticed my list is 333, so sorry about that. But anything else, you guys type. Is there anything else that you think this will affect my coaching because of blank? I think there's lots of different ways that this could affect our coaching. And I'm just going to kind of finish with, remember that this seems like a lot to digest. However, all of this is in place to protect our coaches and our athletes. And my interest being a coach for basically my whole life is I really have a strong belief that I want to ensure that our coaches are educated and protected and ensure that nothing ever happens to our coaching community. So the more educated and the more we work on implementing these things, yes, it's going to take some time and work to do, and it's a lot to digest, but it will protect our community of coaches and our athletes. And then our general understanding that change takes time, and this too will take time to implement. So I do not, I really don't want you guys leaving tonight's webinar and going, oh my goodness, my brain is blowing up. I have all these different things to do. Take off small bites. So find a piece that can be implemented right away, and then, work on that implementation plan over time. The time is now. So there's support in place as far as information, trainings available. So there are supports in place. Turn to groups like myself to help guide you with that. And ensure that something's being done now. So we don't want groups to freeze and say, I don't know what to do. There is support there for that. So what's next? You guys just did training, some training for coaches, so you have an awareness. What's next is the implementation of principles by provincial organizations, which you should start to see, basically now. And then eventually that's going to roll forward down to the CSOs, the provincial recreation organizations, community recreation organizations, and then again, it's already starting in places like Saskatchewan. This is rolling out in facilities, schools, and beyond. So I'm going to finish tonight. I know I'm a couple minutes over, but do you guys have any questions on anything tonight? I know it's a ton of information, and again, I will provide you afterwards with the slideshow. I'll let you guys. I'll leave it open to keep typing as you have questions.